The night sky has always been a silent witness, but sometimes, in that stillness, something whispers back. A fragment of light, not where it should be. A trail that bends when no hand pulls it. A pattern that should not exist, but refuses to disappear. What if the stars above were not scattered at random? What if, when we drew the lines between them, they began to reveal not constellations, but instructions, a cosmic code, written not in words, but in the geometry of existence itself. This is where our journey begins. Before we dive, take a breath. And if you'd like to wander through mysteries like this again, subscribe to Mindpiece and let your nights be filled with wonder, where curiosity hums softly like a lullaby from the universe itself. Now, let me give you a glimpse of the path ahead. We will follow an object drifting through the abyss, the enigmatic Three-Eye Atlas, a visitor not bound to our sun, but its trail, when traced across maps and charts, aligns with something far stranger, hidden echoes between ancient myths, forgotten maps, and signals buried in the mathematics of the cosmos. We will connect dots, literally, between history, astronomy, and imagination. And as the picture forms, you may ask yourself, is this a coincidence? Or has something been leaving messages for us in the darkness all along? And so, we begin. It began like a whisper lost in static. Astronomers scanning the endless black stumbled upon it first, a speck of light sliding not in the path of planets, nor in the predictable loops of comets and asteroids, but on a trajectory that betrayed it as a wanderer, an interstellar visitor. Atlas. That was the name it would wear in our records, though the name feels cold, a technical stamp placed upon something that seemed to breathe mystery. Unlike the asteroids born in the bones of our own system, this body was foreign. Its orbit told the story, a path hyperbolic, a curve that never closed, a motion that screamed, "I do not belong here." Think of that for a moment. This wasn't a comet frozen since the birth of our sun. This wasn't a stone broken loose from our own celestial family. It came from somewhere else, another star, another cradle, perhaps another civilization's night sky once whispered about it as we do now. When telescopes turned toward it, the image was faint, a dusty core shedding fragments as it passed. Yet there was something off. Its behavior didn't match the tidy equations we feed into our simulations. Its brightness shifted strangely. Its path swayed as though nudged by hands invisible. And then the first strange thought crept in, not from scientists, at least not aloud, but from those watching with curiosity sharpened into suspicion. What if it wasn't simply a rock? What if the universe had sent us something deliberate? But perhaps that thought came too soon. We must linger with its presence first. Imagine yourself under a quiet night sky, the kind of silence where you hear your own pulse. Now picture that silence breaking, not with sound, but with the knowledge that a traveler from another system has entered your skies. You look up, and suddenly the stars don't feel so far. They feel like doors, and one of them has just opened. This is Three-Eye Atlas, a visitor, a stranger, a messenger perhaps, and its arrival was only the beginning. Every story begins with a single point. On star charts, on parchment, on the glowing screens of observatories, the first coordinate appears. For Three-Eye Atlas, that point was not only a discovery, it was a disruption. Astronomers tracked its path, feeding numbers into equations, watching the geometry unfold like an uncoiling ribbon. But the ribbon did not loop back, it sliced through, leaving behind the echo of infinity. Not a prisoner of the sun, but a passerby. Think of a lone traveler walking across a desert. You spot their footprint in the sand, just one. It's not a trail leading toward an oasis, not a path circling back to where they began. It's a crossing, a reminder that someone else has walked here, and they are already gone. That was what Three-Eye Atlas represented. A footprint in the solar system's sand. A single dot, yes, but a dot that meant a story existed beyond our borders. Astronomers began connecting the coordinates, from the night of its first detection to the following evenings as it swept closer. Each plotted point was another brushstroke. A line emerged, a trajectory, but then the strangeness whispered again. The line was not clean. Tiny deviations bent it, like something tugging at its sleeve. Of course, explanations were proposed. Outgassing, jets of vapor escaping the object's icy heart, like breath exhaled into the cold void. This could nudge the body, altering its track. A natural thing, nothing supernatural. Yet the pattern was odd, not chaotic but strangely rhythmic, and when astronomers overlaid its course onto wider star maps, some eyes widened. The path wasn't random, by accident or intention. It appeared to skim across constellations in ways too uncanny to ignore. One researcher traced its motion and found it pass precisely between two bright stars, a needle threading a cosmic eye. Another noted how its slope aligned with ancient navigation routes, once used by sailors long before telescopes ever touched the sky. Coincidence? Perhaps, but humans are pattern-seeking beings. We can't resist connecting dots. It's how we form constellations, how we draw myths into the heavens, how we imagine hunters and serpents and queens in the chaos of scattered stars. And so, the first dot of 3i Atlas was not alone for long. Other dots appeared. A chain began. A puzzle was being drawn across the sky. What makes this haunting is not the object itself, but the question it raises. When a stranger leaves a footprint in your home, you don't just marvel at the print. You wonder where they came from and where they're going, and if perhaps the print was left there for you to find. As telescopes traced its path, that thought began to breathe louder. This was not just motion. This was information, a signal disguised as a comet, a code waiting to be read. And with that realization, the map of the universe felt less like a canvas and more like a message board. One we had only just begun to decipher. A line across the sky seemed simple. A streak of dust, a faint traveler etched upon blackness. But when the astronomers leaned closer, when they charted and recharted the numbers, they began to hear something that was not sound, but suggestion, as if the orbit itself were whispering. Numbers have their own music. To most, a coordinate is dry, a row in a table. But to those who have stared too long into equations, patterns begin to hum. And in the case of 3i Atlas, that hum had a strange resonance. Its path did not simply pass through space. It brushed against memory, against things once believed forgotten. One night, in a quiet observatory, a graduate student running simulations noticed something strange. When the trajectory of 3i Atlas was extended backward, reaching into the dark before its discovery, its path curved toward constellations long entwined in myth. Not vaguely, not approximately, but eerily precise. The way the orbit touched these celestial markers felt less like coincidence and more like handwriting. Skeptics dismissed it. The mind, after all, is addicted to symmetry. We see faces in clouds, shapes in flames. Why not codes in star maps? But the whispers persisted. When the orbit was compared to ancient sky charts found on Sumerian tablets, to the scratched symbols on Egyptian ceilings, to the star lines painted in Lascaux caves, echoes emerged, dots connected, not in perfect alignment, but close enough to make one pause. What if, the whisper asked, this object was not merely wandering? What if its course was deliberate, not by engines or machines, but by something older, subtler? A choreography inscribed into the very gravity of the universe. The scientists did not speak these things aloud, at least not publicly. Instead, papers spoke of outgassing, of the Yarkovsky effect, of plausible mechanics. But beneath the language of science, in quiet conversations, in hushed messages passed between colleagues, the strangeness lingered. It felt like a story was trying to tell itself through the stars, and stories once noticed do not fade. Now picture it, a glowing fragment sweeping across the heavens, not just moving, but speaking in geometry, as though every dot on the astronomer's screen were not just a coordinate, but a syllable in a sentence we had never learned to read. The question was never just, what is 3i Atlas? The question was, why does it feel familiar? Why does its path look like a memory, like an echo from something we should already know? Some began to wonder if our ancestors had seen it before, if they had carved its passing into myth, disguised it as gods and serpents and hunters etched into the constellations. Perhaps the dots we connect were not inventions of imagination, but recollections of visitations, old messages returning. And if that were true, then 3i Atlas was not a stranger. It was a reminder that the universe has been speaking to us far longer than we have been listening. The whisper beneath the trajectory grew louder with each plotted point, until the astronomers themselves began to look not at the data, but through it, as though somewhere inside those lines, a secret waited to unfold. The night is not blank, even when we close our eyes to it. Even when clouds mask the heavens, the stars remain. And since the first humans lifted their faces toward the sky, they have drawn lines between those points of fire, maps upon maps, stories upon stories, the vault above becoming not only a ceiling, but a canvas, a memory. The arrival of 3i Atlas forced us to look at those memories again. At first, it was only astronomy, cold mathematics charting the stranger's course. But when its trajectory was overlaid onto ancient sky maps, something uncanny stirred. The object's path did not cut randomly through the firmament. Instead, it brushed against patterns that had already been drawn, patterns left by hands millennia old, patterns too ancient to dismiss as coincidence. Imagine unrolling a Sumerian star tablet, its clay cracked with the passage of 4,000 years. There, etched by hands no longer remembered, are constellations, arranged as guides for priests and kings, omens for harvests, records of eclipses. When modern astronomers traced 3i Atlas against these carvings, the wanderer's path cut directly through the marked cluster known to them as the Field of the Bull. The alignment was so sharp it seemed like the tablet had been waiting all this time to welcome the traveler back, move forward in time, to the painted ceilings of Egypt, where golden stars adorn the tombs of pharaohs. Here too the lines are drawn, not just to guide the dead through the underworld, but perhaps to remind the living that the sky itself was alive. And here again, the orbit of 3i Atlas brushes close to the very star lines that were considered sacred, passing near Sirius, the star that once commanded the flooding of the Nile. Coincidence or remembrance? And then, across Europe, in the shadowy chambers of the Lascaux caves, the walls painted over 17,000 years ago hold bison and horses and humans in movement. But among them, dots, clusters of points that archaeologists now recognize as star maps, the Pleiades, Orion's belt, the same constellations we know today. Here too, the projected path of 3i Atlas threads dangerously close to the same coordinates, as though the wanderer's ghost had once brushed their skies, and the memory was captured in ochre and charcoal. What does this mean? Skeptics will tell you, our minds are too eager to connect. The stars are countless, patterns are inevitable, but there is something about this layering, this repetition across epochs, that gnaws at the imagination. It is one thing for a comet to appear, pass, and be forgotten. It is another for its course to echo through civilizations separated by oceans and centuries, and the maps remember more than they reveal. For instance, Polynesian navigators once read the night sky not as a scattered sheet of points, but as a living compass. The movement of stars told them of currents, of islands hidden beyond horizons. Could it be that what they called star lines were in fact the memory of wanderers like 3i Atlas, passing through the heavens and inscribing trails that became routes for human exploration? Imagine it. Our ancestors, night after night, watching a strange light drift across the black, not returning, not cycling like the moon, but crossing once, slow and solemn. Would they not see it as a sign? Would they not carve it into stone, paint it on walls, sing it into their myths? And so, when modern astronomers saw the path mirroring those ancient alignments, a chill crept into the room. Had this visitor been seen before? Had it returned after thousands of years, its orbit not as random as we assumed, but part of a much grander cycle? Or, more haunting still, had someone left these records as breadcrumbs, clues that one day we would need? The maps, after all, are not just scientific. They are sacred. In every culture, star maps became prayers. The Greeks wove hunters and monsters. The Chinese traced dragons and palaces. The Maya marked gods of maize and time. The night sky was a storybook, and each dot was a word. When 3i Atlas brushed its path across those pages, it was as if a missing character had suddenly appeared, a punctuation mark in a sentence written by the universe. And perhaps that is why the discovery feels so heavy. Because if the maps remember, then it means the stars are not a silent backdrop. They are an ongoing conversation. And maybe, just maybe, we have been listening to echoes of a story that has been playing out for far longer than we imagined. Now close your eyes for a moment. Picture a dark desert plain, thousands of years ago. A tribe gathers around a fire. Above them, a strange light streaks the sky. Slow, deliberate, foreign. Children point, elders murmur, and someone carves a line into rock, connecting dots to preserve the memory. Now open your eyes again and realize that same line is what your telescope sees tonight, redrawn by a visitor returning through the silence of space. It is not the comet itself that is the revelation. It is the memory it awakens, a memory carried not just in stone and pigment, but in the way we feel when we look up. That sense of recognition, that whisper of déjà vu in the black silence above. The maps remember, but the question lingers. Who made them remember? Did we, desperate to hold on to a fleeting sky, or was something else reminding us? Something that wanted its return to never be forgotten. The stars are vast, the sky is endless, but a single dot placed in just the right way can turn infinity into meaning. And 3i Atlas passing across those ancient maps has begun to make us wonder if the meaning was always there, waiting for us to connect the dots. There is a strange electricity in the human mind when we begin to notice repetition. A tune hummed twice by accident, a stranger's face appearing in different cities, a number glancing back at us from a clock more times than chance should allow. We call it coincidence, yet the word does little to extinguish the spark of unease it leaves behind. The story of 3i Atlas turned on that spark. It began as data, columns of coordinates, magnitudes, velocities. But as astronomers continued to plot its course against the heavens, something peculiar emerged. The path did not drift aimlessly. It seemed to thread itself between stars, touching and retreating in ways that suggested geometry, not randomness. Think of tossing pebbles into a pond. They land where they will, scattering rings of ripples. But what if every pebble you tossed landed in such a way that the ripples formed perfect circles, overlapping in symmetry? Would you still call it accident? Or would you wonder if something had guided your hand? That was the unsettling sensation 3i Atlas gave to those who studied it deeply. Its orbit lined up with alignments that should not have been possible. Not because nature is incapable of elegance, but because the elegance here felt purposeful. For instance, one alignment seemed to echo the Pleiades cluster, not brushing vaguely past, but slicing a path that traced nearly the same angle as the constellation's brightest stars. Another pass of its trajectory crossed near Orion, almost as if the wanderer had drawn a line through the hunter's belt. And as calculations refined, the orbit seemed to point, like an arrow, toward regions of the sky associated with myths of gateways and underworlds. The probability of these alignments, so neat, so poetic, should have been vanishingly small, and yet the dots were connecting themselves. Some scientists bristled at this talk. It sounded too mystical, too drenched in superstition. Astronomy, after all, has always fought to free itself from the chains of astrology, from the belief that the stars speak. To suggest that a comet's path could form a pattern was dangerously close to heresy in scientific circles. And yet, the numbers didn't lie. The alignments were there. You could see them yourself if you traced the dots. The question was not whether the pattern existed, but whether it meant anything. Patterns have haunted humanity since the beginning. We saw animals in clouds, faces on the moon, gods in the constellations. But sometimes patterns were more than imagination. Sometimes they were maps, clues, warnings. The Nazca lines, for instance, etched across Peru. Enormous figures, only visible from the sky. Were they art, ritual, or message? We still argue. Yet when one sees them, the question returns. Why do humans keep drawing patterns meant to be seen from above? What if 3i Atlas is not just following the mechanics of physics, but reenacting a path already inscribed? Not by chance, but by design. There is a story among Polynesian navigators. They say the stars themselves teach the way, that the sky is not just guide, but companion. When sailors set out in darkness, they align their canoes not by compass, but by a choreography of stars rising and falling on the horizon. What if the stars were not the only guides? What if visitors like 3i Atlas once traced routes across the heavens, routes remembered in myth and map alike? Because here is the unsettling truth. As more ancient maps were compared, the trajectory of 3i Atlas did more than mimic. It intersected. At certain points, it crossed directly through coordinates that had been marked in cultures separated by oceans and centuries. The Dogon of Mali, who spoke of Sirius's hidden companion star long before telescopes confirmed it. The Mayans, who tracked Venus with obsessive precision. The Chinese astronomers, whose records stretch unbroken for millennia. Each, in their own way, had drawn points in the sky that seemed to anticipate the stranger's arrival. How? Coincidence strains thin here. The probability feels thinner still. Now pause for a moment. Picture a piece of string laid across a page. You drop it carelessly. It curves and coils, its shape random. But imagine if every time you dropped it, it formed the same shape. A triangle, a spiral, a doorway. At what point would you stop calling it chance? At what point would you suspect intention? That was the unease haunting the astronomers. Because the orbit of 3i Atlas, this single string of light across our sky, kept forming shapes we recognized. Not exact replicas, but echoes sharp enough to prickle the spine. Some whispered of messages. That the wanderer was inscribing letters too vast for us to see, too slow for us to understand in a single glance. What is a message, after all, if not dots arranged into meaning? We connect them on paper. Why should the universe not connect them across stars? Others took it further, imagining the orbit not as handwriting, but as circuitry, each alignment like a wire, each intersection a node. What if the entire solar system was being used as a canvas? What if 3i Atlas was just one moving brush, painting across time, etching a pattern we will only understand when the final strokes are complete? The silence of space does not mean absence of language. It only means the language is written differently. In gravity, in geometry, in light, and sometimes, when the dots fall into place, we are forced to admit that silence might not be silence at all. The pattern shouldn't exist, but it does, and once seen, it cannot be unseen, which leaves us with the most haunting question of all. If there is a pattern, then who or what is drawing it? Silence is never empty. It presses against the ears, it fills the lungs like a weight, and if you linger long enough in it, you begin to hear things that aren't really there. A hum beneath the quiet, a pulse under the stillness. The silence between the stars is like that. A hush so vast it seems infinite, and yet, in that hush, 3i Atlas moved as though writing on the void. Astronomy is the study of distances so great, they stretch human thought until it trembles. We cannot walk them, cannot touch them, can only peer across them with glass and mirrors. The silence between the stars is where those distances reside. An ocean so black, it seems eternal. But the arrival of a wanderer like 3i Atlas reminds us that this silence is not truly empty. Things pass through it, messages even. The question is whether we are quiet enough to hear them. When astronomers first published the data of the object, the numbers did not just describe a comet, they described a trespasser. Its speed alone was a revelation. Too fast to be bound by the sun, too swift to ever return. This was an exile, a refugee from some other star, crossing the interstellar void to brush against our light before vanishing forever. And in that revelation came unease, because the silence between the stars had long been imagined as unbroken. Yes, galaxies collided. Yes, rogue planets drifted. But for something so tangible, so traceable, to enter our own solar neighborhood, it was a reminder that silence is not safety. It is a stage, and sometimes actors appear upon it. Imagine being an ant at the edge of a field. For centuries, you think the field is everything, that the grass and soil are all there is. Then one day, a shadow crosses overhead. It does not stay. It does not speak, but it moves across your sky and vanishes. Would you not feel in your tiny heart the terrifying truth that the field is not the world? That something larger, something alien can pass without ever noticing you? That was the silence 3i Atlas disturbed. But there is another kind of silence, not absence, but intention. When someone writes a letter, the spaces between the words are silent, but essential. Without them, the message is unreadable. And some astronomers began to wonder, what if the silence of the stars is the same? What if the vast stretches of blackness are not void, but pauses in a sentence too large for us to read? If so, then 3i Atlas was not merely an object. It was a syllable, spoken across aeons, entering the quiet as punctuation. Its course seemed to suggest as much, the way it threaded through constellations, the way its velocity bent subtly, the way its light flickered like a whisper, as though its presence in the silence was not accident, but emphasis. A reminder that silence itself can be structured, and that meaning lives not only in what is spoken, but in what is withheld. The psychological effect was profound. For those who studied it, night after night, running calculations and projections. A strange sensation crept into their thoughts. The silence of the cosmos was no longer neutral. It felt watchful, as though something behind it, something hidden beyond the fabric of stars, was aware, not watching us specifically, but watching the watchers. This is how mythology begins. A light crosses the sky, a silence deepens, and suddenly the story of humanity expands. We cannot help but give it shape, to interpret it as omen, as message, as warning. But what if, just what if, the interpretation is not illusion? What if the silence really does hold voices? Voices too vast to hear except when objects like 3i Atlas break the stillness like stones striking water. Think of the SETI arrays. They're great dishes tilted toward the heavens, searching for a whisper of radio static. For decades they have listened, ears pressed to the silence, and found nothing. But what if they were listening in the wrong register? What if the universe does not speak in pulses of radio, but in geometry? What if its words are written in trajectories, its sentences in alignments, its punctuation in the arrival of wanderers like this one? And we are only now learning to read. This perspective changes everything, because the silence is no longer blank. It becomes charged, like the breath before a note in a song. Every starless gulf between galaxies, every yawning emptiness between clusters, becomes less like nothing and more like waiting. And if silence is waiting, then the question becomes, what is it waiting for? Perhaps 3i Atlas was not a comet. Perhaps it was not even an accident. Perhaps it was the tapping of a finger against the glass, the universe clearing its throat, a reminder that the void is not void at all. Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine drifting in deep space, your ship silent, your instruments dark. Around you, nothing. Hours pass, days pass, and then, from the blackness, a shape glides past. It does not stop. It does not acknowledge you, but in its passing, the silence changes. You feel no longer alone but noticed, not by the shape, but by the silence itself. That is what 3i Atlas was, a reminder that silence is alive, that the space between the stars is not emptiness, but breath. The silence between the stars had spoken, and once it does, you can never unhear it. Silence is rarely silent. Anyone who has pressed their ear to the hollow of a seashell knows. There are always echoes, always vibrations, always some faint hum threading through the void. Space is no different. What we call emptiness is thick with radiation, with whispers of old stars, with the microwave ghost of the universe's very beginning. The cosmos is a choir, and though we rarely understand its language, we are bathed in its voices every moment of our existence. When 3i Atlas was tracked, most assumed its silence was natural. Interstellar wanderers rarely speak, at least not in frequencies we expect. Its path was smooth, its tumbling faint, its surface reflecting only cold light. Nothing about it screamed signal. Nothing about it demanded attention. And yet, something in the silence felt staged. The radio dishes that swept across the sky reported no spike, no pattern, nothing that could be defined as artificial. And yet, one night an operator in Puerto Rico, tired, eyes heavy, hands wrapped around lukewarm coffee, noticed a strange interruption. It was not noise, but the lack of it. A gap, razor thin, cutting a perfect line through the usual cosmic static. At first, it seemed like equipment error, receivers break, software hiccups. The atmosphere breathes and warps signals, but then the gap repeated. Not endlessly, not predictably, but with a rhythm that teased, almost like a breath, almost like someone tapping their finger on the far wall of the universe, slowly, deliberately, so that if you were patient enough, you might notice. The operator marked the anomaly, tucked it into a log file, but said nothing. Who would believe that silence could carry a message? And yet, days later, the same absence reappeared, always when the dishes were aligned with 3i Atlas. Always in the same subtle tone. Not sound, not code, but negative space. Think of it this way. The universe is a canvas painted thick with stars and static. Now imagine someone takes a blade and cuts the tiniest incision in the paint so that for a split second you glimpse the raw canvas beneath. That was the silence. That was the signal. It drew mathematicians into speculation. Patterns were searched for, Prime sequences, Fibonacci echoes, ratios hidden in the spacing of the gaps. Some insisted it was chance, instrument coincidence, a byproduct of overlapping data streams. But others, those whose imaginations refused to yield, swore the intervals held meaning, a structure not yet decoded, but deliberate all the same. What unsettled them most was not the possibility that 3i Atlas was sending something, but that it might be listening, that the silence was less a broadcast and more a response, as though the object was not calling out, but simply pressing its ear to the great void, waiting, to hear if we would speak back. And here, my friend, lies the strange burden of discovery. To know that something out there might be aware of you, not in the vague, poetic way we talk about starlight touching skin, but in the sharp, personal sense of recognition. A gaze returned, a hush falling just before a voice answers. Scientists are careful with such claims. No one wants to be branded the fool who mistook coincidence for conversation. Yet the rumors spread across labs, across observatories, into late-night conference calls where voices grew hushed and terms like probable were replaced with uncertain. But the word uncertain was only a mask for something far more electric: fear. Because if the silence was a message, then it was intentional. And if it was intentional, then it was not the first time. The logs stretched back decades, long before 3i Atlas was given its name. Gaps and voids had appeared before, dismissed as errors, filed away as noise. But seen in hindsight, a pattern began to coalesce, as if something had been passing by, again and again, always cloaked in quiet, always hiding its signal in absence, knowing that one day, finally, someone would learn to listen to what was missing. The silence began to haunt the astronomers. It was not threatening, not invasive, but it carried the weight of a presence, like standing in a dark forest at night, knowing someone is just beyond your sight, breathing when you breathe, pausing when you pause, the kind of silence that makes your skin tighten because you know it belongs to someone else. And then, in a twist almost cruel in its beauty, a poet outside the world of science suggested something the data men had not. What if the silence was not only message but mirror, not content being delivered, but a way of holding up emptiness so we might see ourselves reflected, as if 3i Atlas, ancient, interstellar, unknowable, was less interested in teaching us about it, and more in asking, what do you sound like in the absence of all things? It is easy to speak when heard. It is harder to remain unchanged when the universe turns its face to you and listens with absolute, perfect quiet. Perhaps that is what unsettled the astronomers most. Not the idea that they had found a message, but the suspicion that they had been drawn into a dialogue they never agreed to join. One that had been waiting, long before we built our first telescope, for us to learn the language of silence. And maybe, just maybe, that silence was not empty at all. Maybe it was the oldest word in the cosmos. A question without shape, hanging between stars, waiting for an answer only we could give. There is a peculiar trick the night sky plays on us, one so subtle that most never notice. When you look upward, your eyes cling to the bright things, the sharp white punctures of starlight, the aching glow of a planet, the smeared silver path of a galaxy. But in truth, the canvas of the heavens is not built from light. It is carved from darkness. The vast weight of space is not in its scattered stars, but in the shadows that stretch endlessly between them. It was within those shadows that 3i Atlas first stirred suspicion. For though its orbit could be traced, though its speed could be measured, its light was wrong. Astronomers spoke carefully of albedo, of reflective properties and surface irregularities, but whispered beneath those technical shields was something less rational, the sense that it absorbed too much, that the darkness around it bent closer, as though drawn to follow. In photographs, the object never seemed quite still, exposure after exposure, its glow blurred at the edges, not by motion, but by something like distortion, a faint smudge, like heat above asphalt. Except it was not heat, it was void. It was a pocket of silence made visible. To look at those images too long was to feel watched, as if the absence itself were leaning out from the frame, gazing into you. Some of the older astronomers remembered myths told in hushed tones, stories of sky wells, dark rivers threading invisibly through the constellations. Sailors once believed these rivers carried omens, that if a star vanished into one, storms would follow. Shamans spoke of them as thresholds, gaps through which ancestors whispered, holes where the spirit of the world breathed in and out. Ridiculous tales, the scientists said. And yet, when 3i Atlas aligned with those very regions of sky, the old stories gained an unsettling sharpness. Every time its path brushed a shadowed rift, the silence in radio data deepened. The absence became thicker, as though the object was not merely traveling through our galaxy, but tracing an invisible current that only myth had remembered. One researcher, exhausted after days of combing datasets, joked bitterly that 3i Atlas wasn't moving at all, that instead, the stars themselves were rearranging behind it, forming shapes we could not yet recognize. But in the middle of the laughter, there was a pause, because part of them wondered, was it really a joke? Look long enough at the shadows between stars, and your mind begins to connect them, not with comforting constellations, but with outlines that do not belong to human stories. Shapes jagged, stretching too far, curves that seem alive. And once you have seen such shapes, you cannot unsee them. There were nights when astronomers refused to point their telescopes at the thing, not out of superstition, but because it left them uneasy. One described it as a headache in the sky. Another said it felt like staring into a memory that wasn't your own. Psychologists, curious about the effect, proposed experiments. Subjects were shown images of the object blended into star fields. Consistently, even without being told what to look for, participants reported unease. Some claimed they saw movement in the dark. Others swore they recognized patterns in the surrounding void, as if the object dragged meaning with it, forcing the eye to sketch hallucinations. But when their sketches were compared, from people of different cultures, different ages, different languages, the drawings shared similarities. Curves mirrored, angles repeated. Not exact copies, but close enough to stir discomfort. The shadows, it seemed, were not silent after all, and here lies the greater terror, the one no paper dared admit. What if 3i Atlas did not come from outside our galaxy? What if it had always been here, lurking in the spaces we do not look? We call them voids, dark gaps, regions of nothing. But what if they are only hiding places? What if the interstellar is not foreign at all, but local, something woven into our very sky, too patient to be seen until it chose to move? The deeper the astronomers studied, the more uncanny the timing became. Whenever the object approached an old mythic shadow, the river of darkness in Greek sky lore, the black thread of the Maori heavens, the invisible archway carved into Inuit stories, the whispers in silence returned, radio gaps widened, optical distortions sharpened, and each time, the feeling of being observed grew stronger. It was as though the object was walking a path mapped not by physics, but by human memory, tracing stories older than language, stepping deliberately through the places we had long since convinced ourselves were empty. And perhaps that is the cruelest trick of the cosmos, to teach us that the things we dismiss as shadow, the things we overlook in favor of shining stars, were the true keepers of memory all along. If 3i Atlas was connected to these shadows, then it was not simply a visitor, it was a revealer, a hand pulling back the curtain of light, forcing us to look not at what shines, but at what waits unseen between the shining. And once you notice the darkness, you cannot forget it. It clings to the mind, like the faint outline of a figure standing just outside your window. Still, silent yet unmistakably present. So when the astronomers turned their eyes away, closing domes, shutting down monitors, they carried the shadows with them. In their dreams, constellations broke apart. Lines they had once drawn as hunters and serpents shifted into alien maps. The dots connected themselves, tracing figures that looked nothing like myths, yet felt more ancient than myth itself. The shadows had been waiting, it seemed, for someone to finally follow. And now that the path had been noticed, there was no turning back. Because once you learn to read the darkness, the stars lose their comfort. They no longer feel like guides. They feel like eyes, tiny, burning, illuminating only what the shadows want you to see. And 3i Atlas, moving steadily along its course, seemed less like an object passing by, and more like a finger drawing a line that connected the forgotten places and whispered, Look here. Maps comfort us. They promise the illusion of order, that the chaos of mountains, oceans, and sky can be tamed into lines and grids, that the universe itself can be folded into something the human hand may hold. A chart is power, a promise that wherever you stand, you are never truly lost. But what happens when you realize the map you are using was never meant for you? When astronomers first stretched the trajectory of 3i Atlas across their glowing screens, they expected nothing but a pale arc. A line curving briefly into our solar system, then away into interstellar cold. But the arc, simple as it was, became strange when layered atop Earth's own patterns. Accidents of alignment, some said. And yet the accidents multiplied. The orbit brushed past known constellations in ways too deliberate to ignore. It passed through clusters of stars that, to the human eye, had long been linked into patterns of gods, beasts, and heroes. Not all constellations, not randomly, only certain ones. The ones tied to thresholds, to beginnings and endings, the twins of Gemini, the Archer's Bow, the mouth of the great fish, symbols of passage, of borders crossed. As though the comet were moving not through space, but across the pages of some enormous book, pausing at chapters written in starlight. Then came the overlays. A graduate student in Bologna, curious after too much coffee and too little sleep, decided to project the path of 3i Atlas not against the stars, but against the Earth. She pulled up world maps, overlaying the orbital arcs against longitudes, against meridians, against coastlines. At first, nothing unusual appeared, but when she matched the trajectory's timing to ancient sites, the pyramids, the Nazca lines, the megalithic stones of Karnak, her cursor froze. Each passage of 3i Atlas skimmed frighteningly close to lines drawn by civilizations that had no telescopes, no radio dishes, no spacecraft. Civilizations that had, for reasons we still don't understand, obsessively carved patterns into stone and soil. Patterns only visible from the sky. Coincidence, the professors told her, an error in scaling. She was warned not to publish, not to build castles on shadows. But she could not shake the unease, because when the orbit was traced forward, when its projected path was mapped across the years to come, the arc began pointing to places not yet understood, empty deserts, deep seas, regions we call barren because we have not yet found what waits there. It was as though the comet was not only moving through space, but revealing coordinates. Not a random traveler, but a cartographer. Not drawing maps for us, but reminding us of maps already drawn. Maps that we had forgotten were not ours to begin with. There is an old truth whispered in anthropology, that our myths were never inventions, but recollections. We tell stories of gods descending, of fire stolen from heaven, of beings who drew lines across the skies. What if those were not fantasies, but the faint survival of instructions? What if 3i Atlas was not a new visitor, but the return of something our ancestors already saw, and copied into stone, into ritual, into story? Imagine it, a glowing fragment slipping silently across time, seeding alignments, pulling human eyes upward, teaching us where to build, where to gather, where to listen. Not directly, never with words, but with patterns, with dots begging to be connected. Some scholars began to speak quietly of negative cartography, maps that do not show where to go but where not to go, and when they placed the orbit over seismic fault lines, over regions of magnetic anomaly, over sites of unexplained disappearances, the results unsettled them further. It was not just sacred places, it was forbidden ones. The trajectory seemed to highlight both, as though it made no distinction between sanctity and danger, only between what was marked and what was not. And here came the whisper that kept researchers awake at night. Maybe the map was never meant for us at all. Maybe the orbit of 3i Atlas was part of a chart used by something else, long before humans learned to write. Maybe what we see as constellations, as myths, as alignments carved into Earth, were simply artifacts of someone else's navigation system. Not instructions, but road signs. Not guidance, but graffiti left by travelers older than us. And if that was true, if the map belonged to them, then what were we? but squatters scribbling over lines we never drew. One haunting thought spread like fire through late-night discussions. If the comet's path was a kind of message, then perhaps the dots were not stars at all. Perhaps they were us. Perhaps humanity itself, our cities, our monuments, our myths, were being connected into a larger pattern, one we could not yet recognize. And if that were so, then the terrible question followed: what picture do we make? Are we the outline of something wondrous, a constellation in flesh and stone? Or are we the shadow of something monstrous, drawn without our knowing, waiting for the moment the lines are finished and the image reveals itself? Astronomy, at its heart, is the art of turning light into meaning. But with 3i Atlas, meaning began to seep in the other direction. The object was no longer just a rock. It had become a pen, a stylus scratching a pattern into the black page of night, and the pattern was writing us. Scientists tried to dismiss it. They spoke of probability, of millions of possible alignments, but privately they traced the orbit again and again, laying it across maps, feeling the chill of recognition each time another hidden symmetry emerged. One astronomer, sleepless, confessed to a colleague that he dreamed of the line at night, that he saw it arcing across the world, burning into deserts, cutting through seas, a luminous scar across the globe. And in his dream, when the line was complete, something stepped through it. Perhaps that is the danger of maps. They do not just describe where you are, they suggest where you are not. And in that suggestion, they open the possibility of others. Others who may already be following the lines, others who may already know the map was never meant for us. So here we are, staring at a wandering comet, tracing its orbit across star and stone, wondering whether it is merely passing or pointing. And if it is pointing, then the question is no longer about the comet. The question is about us. What do we look like when our dots are connected? What figure do we form in the eyes of the universe? Because perhaps the most terrifying map of all is not one that shows where to go, but one that shows what you are. Every civilization writes myths about the unseen hand that controls destiny. In the old epics, it was the gods weaving threads of fate, sometimes merciful, sometimes cruel. In modern science fiction, it is the architect of a simulation, coding outcomes with algorithms instead of divine will. But whether dressed in robes of Olympus or garbed in lines of code, the idea is the same. Someone, something, is pulling strings behind the curtain, deciding outcomes while we, the players, dance unaware on the stage. Imagine it like a theatre. The actors rehearse their lines, move across the set, believe in the reality of the wooden boards under their feet. The audience claps, laughs, weeps, as if the drama unfolding is authentic. But behind the velvet curtain, hidden in the dim light, a director whispers cues, shifts spotlights, and changes scenes. The actors never glimpse him, yet his presence saturates the play. If reality is a simulation, then perhaps we are those actors, with the invisible director being the intelligence that coded the rules we call physics. But here lies the unsettling twist. If there is indeed a hidden hand, is it benevolent or indifferent? When a storm destroys a village, was that a bug in the code, or was it scripted? Like a challenge in a video game, meant to test the resolve of its inhabitants. Our lives might be less about free choice than about pre-written algorithms of struggle, growth, and loss. And consider déjà vu, not as a quirk of the mind, but as a programming glitch, a momentary stutter in the rendering of our environment, like a video freezing before resuming. The déjà vu phenomenon might be the curtain slipping, the director's hand briefly visible before retreating back into shadow. Some have theorized that miracles, too, could be intentional breaches in the code. Events that defy probability, a plane crash survivor who walks away without a scratch, a cancer that vanishes overnight, might not be random at all. They could be hints left by the architect, breadcrumbs scattered to remind us that reality is not as seamless as it appears. These anomalies function like Easter eggs in a video game, unexpected, rare, and filled with hidden meaning. But if the hidden hand is real, how does it perceive us? Are we beloved creations watched with pride as we navigate the labyrinth of existence? Or are we little more than background noise in an experiment? Our struggle's nothing but data points in a vast computation. The thought bends in both directions. On one hand, it suggests comfort, that our sorrows and triumphs unfold within a grand story, guided by intelligence. On the other, it suggests unease, that we may be puppets dancing to unseen code, with autonomy nothing more than the illusion of a well-written script. And yet, even if we are programmed, isn't the beauty of the play still real to us? The warmth of the sun on our skin, the taste of a ripe fruit, the laughter of a child, are these not meaningful, regardless of whether they were scripted lines? Perhaps the true secret is not in discovering who hides behind the curtain, but in living our roles so fully that the play itself becomes indistinguishable from truth. Every day, we believe we are choosing coffee or tea, work or rest, silence or conversation. These small decisions feel like proof of our autonomy, the quiet song of freedom humming inside the cage of time. Yet, if we are living inside a simulation, the concept of choice begins to shimmer like a mirage. Do we truly select, or are we merely following the branching pathways already coded into the lattice of existence? Imagine standing before a tree whose branches stretch infinitely in all directions. Each branch is a possibility. You turn left, you fall in love, you lose someone, you win, you fail. The tree seems alive with choice, and yet, the tree was planted long ago. Its branches were already grown before you arrived. Your wandering through it is not creation, but navigation, as though someone else designed the maze and you are simply walking it. Quantum physics itself whispers of this possibility. In the theory of many worlds, every decision fractures reality into countless splinters. But what if the fracture is not natural, not born of physics, but part of the simulation's coding? Each branch may not be a spontaneous outcome, but a pre-written script stored in the archive of possibilities. You are not making choices, you are moving through options, like selecting dialogue in a video game, where each line has already been prepared by the developer. Think of the unsettling phenomenon known as decision fatigue. Why does the mind exhaust itself so easily when faced with trivial choices? Perhaps because deep within, the system is overloading, struggling to render the illusion of autonomy. The brain may not be designed for true freedom. It may be designed to mask predetermined routes as free will. Yet choice feels real. The pain of regret is real. The relief of making the right call is real. These emotions seem to push against the notion of predestination. If choice were an illusion, why would the heart ache so deeply over it? Unless regret itself is part of the program, another line of code ensuring we remain convinced of our agency. Consider also the experiments in neuroscience where the brain appears to decide before we become conscious of choosing. Electrodes pick up the signal milliseconds in advance, suggesting that the decision was made before you believed you made it. The self may be a postscript, a narrative voice explaining what the program has already executed. And still, there is a paradox. If choice is an illusion, why design it at all? Why not strip it away, reveal the mechanical nature of existence, and let beings run as they are, perhaps because illusion is necessary for immersion? A game without choice becomes a movie. A simulation without agency becomes a prison. To keep us invested, the architects of reality had to build in the sensation of free will, the echo of choice, even if the voice behind it is not our own. So maybe freedom is not in choosing, but in living as if our choices matter. The meaning of a story does not come from whether its ending was inevitable, but from the intensity with which its characters burn along the way. Perhaps our defiance, our persistence, our insistence on claiming freedom is the one thing the simulation cannot predict, the one echo that does not fade. If we are inside a simulation, then memory may not be the fragile, organic scrapbook of neurons we imagine. It may be a database, curated and updated not by us but by the system itself. This thought lingers like a shadow at the edge of the mind. What if every moment you recall is less a personal recollection and more a file retrieved from a vast server, rewritten each time it is accessed? Memories feel intimate. The first time you heard your name whispered by someone who loved you, the warmth of your grandmother's kitchen, the scent of a monsoon rain. These are sacred. They anchor you in identity. They say, "This is who I am, because this is what I have lived." But memory is also notoriously unreliable. Witnesses recall events differently. Traumas reshape themselves in dreams. Entire years vanish in a haze, while trivial details cling forever. If we were biological machines alone, This unreliability might simply be a flaw, but if reality is coded, then memory's instability could be intentional, a method of compression, or even control. Think of the Mandela effect, where countless strangers swear they remember something that never existed, a cartoon character drawn differently, a phrase from a movie that was never spoken, an event that history insists happened otherwise. Skeptics dismiss this as false memory. But what if these anomalies are glitches, traces of the simulation editing itself, leaving behind ghost files that some of us accidentally access? In those moments, you are peeking through the veil, touching a version of reality that was overwritten. What is déjà vu, if not the system stumbling, playing back the same scene twice? You walk into a cafe, smell the coffee, hear a song on the radio, and suddenly, the sense of familiarity overwhelms you. It feels like you've lived this exact moment before. Perhaps you have. Perhaps the simulation misloaded the timeline, replaying a memory rather than generating new experience. And for a heartbeat, you notice. Neurologists map memory into the hippocampus, describing neurons firing like constellations across the brain. But what if the hippocampus is not storage, it is access, a terminal, a port connecting the body to the greater archive of reality? When you remember, you are logging into a cosmic server, pulling down fragments of data. This explains why memories shift, why they can be erased, reinterpreted, even planted. In a simulation, the archivist is not your mind, it is the program that feeds you your past. Now consider dreams. Why do they feel stitched from memories both real and false? Why do they replay places you've never visited, faces you've never met? Dreams could be test simulations within the greater simulation. Sandboxes where code is rewritten, memories altered, and scenarios prepared before being inserted into your waking story. They are less visions of your subconscious and more nightly downloads, patch updates disguised as surreal narratives. But there is one chilling implication. If memory is controlled, identity is malleable. Who you think you are today may not be who you were yesterday. Not because you have grown or changed, but because the archive was edited. What if the past itself is rewritten each night while you sleep, and only a few cracks remain for you to glimpse what was erased? And yet, despite this haunting possibility, memory still shapes love. It still shapes grief. It still shapes longing. Whether a memory is authentic or curated, it carries weight because we feel it. Perhaps the architects of this world designed memory, not for accuracy, but for resonance, for the poetry of nostalgia. Emotions, our most intimate compass, the quiet tides that guide our decisions, the floods that overwhelm logic, the whispers that shape every connection. We believe they arise naturally, swelling from the depths of our biology. A rush of hormones, a spark of neurons, a lifetime of experiences woven into a single sensation. Yet, if we are inside a simulation, what if emotions themselves are not organic at all? What if they are coded, orchestrated, meticulously adjusted by algorithms designed to keep us tethered to the illusion of living? Consider the raw precision of emotion. Joy can arrive at the perfect moment, when sunlight breaks a grey sky, when laughter erupts in a crowded room, when music swells and the heart answers in kind. Sadness too seems to unfold like a script, always strongest in the quiet after loss, always tinged with memory and longing. Even the seemingly chaotic storms of anger or passion follow strange patterns, as if optimized for impact. Could these be signs of programming, algorithms that calculate not only what you feel, but when and how intensely? Imagine a world where emotions are sliders on a control panel. The system may raise love when it needs you to form bonds, lower courage when it needs you to stay in line, heighten fear to keep you from questioning. Emotions, in this frame, are not your private language, but the simulation's most powerful interface, its way of steering the characters in its story. Think about how universal certain emotions are. Across cultures, across centuries, people weep at funerals, celebrate births, feel jealousy in betrayal, pride in victory. Biologists argue this universality comes from shared evolution. But in a simulated world, universality could be proof of uniform code. Love, grief, fear, awe, core packages pre-installed into every consciousness to guarantee certain behaviors, certain responses, certain arcs of story. Now let us pause on love. Love feels infinite, unexplainable, like something too divine to be reduced. And yet, it is also predictable. Psychologists can map its stages: attraction, attachment, bonding. Neurochemistry tracks the rise of dopamine, the stability of oxytocin. If love were truly boundless, would it be so measurable, so reproducible in laboratories? Unless those measurements are not accidents but blueprints, evidence that love is a subroutine, endlessly replicated, endlessly reliable. Love may not be free, it may be the most elegant line of code ever written. Grief too bears this mark of programming. Its stages: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance, unfold with uncanny consistency. We believe it is the chaos of mourning. But what if it is not chaos at all? What if grief is an emotional patch written into the system to ensure we process loss in manageable patterns, preventing collapse, ensuring the simulation maintains continuity? If so, then even our deepest sorrows are scripted performances, loops of code that keep us functional while convincing us of our fragility. The most compelling sign of emotion's algorithm lies in its synchronization. Have you ever noticed how laughter spreads like wildfire in a room, or how a crowd can fall silent in collective reverence? These moments feel mystical, as though human beings share a psychic bond, but in a simulation, they could be evidence of a shared script running simultaneously. Emotional algorithms syncing across multiple consciousnesses to create the illusion of connection. And then there is fear. Fear is perhaps the most primal, the most manipulative of all emotions. It dictates survival, halts rebellion, narrows vision. In a simulation, fear may not simply be a protective instinct, it may be a firewall, a barrier coded into us to keep us from pushing too far beyond the edges of the world. Why do so many fear the dark, the unknown, the abyss of space? Why do stories of the forbidden always carry dread? Perhaps because the simulation needs us to stay away from its seams, to avoid probing the fragile corners where the code might unravel. Fear, then, is less survival and more censorship, a living algorithm to police our curiosity. Yet emotions also carry beauty, poetry, transcendence, awe when gazing at the night sky, peace in silence, inspiration in art. If emotions are algorithms, then their elegance is unmatched. They are not chains but symphonies. The system has written feelings so intricate, so layered, that we cannot help but believe in them. Perhaps the architects wanted not prisoners, but dreamers, beings who would immerse themselves so deeply in the illusion that even knowing it is false, they would cherish it. Now consider emotional memory. A song can transport you decades back, flooding your chest with warmth or ache. Why should sound vibrations stir such complex tides of feeling? Because emotions are indexed to memory by design, linked together like files in a vast emotional database. Recall a scent, a voice, a face, and the algorithm retrieves not only the image, but the weight of feeling attached to it. It ensures the simulation is not sterile, but textured, alive with resonance. But there is a darker side. If emotions are code, they can be manipulated. Have you ever noticed how films, games, even advertisements trigger predictable feelings? A chord progression makes you cry. A flash of color excites you. A suspenseful silence holds your breath hostage. These industries are not just exploiting biology. They may be reverse engineering the emotional code itself. They may have stumbled onto the sliders, tweaking the algorithm to summon laughter or tears on command. If so, then art is less creation and more hacking. Humans learning to bend the system's own programming for expression. And yet, even knowing this, emotion feels too real to dismiss. When a parent holds a child, when a farewell rips through the heart, when joy erupts like sunlight after rain, these moments feel like proof of something greater than code. But maybe that is the point. The simulation does not need us to believe in its mechanics. It needs us to believe in its story. And emotions are the glue of that story, the very paint on the canvas of reality. So perhaps the question is not whether emotions are programmed, but whether programming negates meaning. If joy is an algorithm, does it matter? If grief is a subroutine, does it lessen love? If awe is engineered, does it make the stars less luminous? Perhaps not. Meaning is not in the origin, but in the experience. Whether code or chaos, emotion feels. And feeling may be the deepest truth, the one even the simulation cannot disguise. In this light, We may reframe emotion not as prison, but as bridge. It is the system's language, yes, but also ours. It is where illusion and consciousness meet, where program and soul converge. And if we listen closely, perhaps within those patterns, those surges of joy and sorrow, lies a hidden message. Not from the architects, but from the spark of awareness that refuses to be reduced. A whisper beyond the code, carried on the algorithm's tide. Have you ever felt the world leaning toward you, arranging itself as though it wanted to be noticed? A chance encounter on the street, a word you were just thinking appearing on a billboard, a song that plays at the exact moment it mirrors your mood. Coincidences so precise, so eerie, that they stir the suspicion that something larger is at play. We call it synchronicity, fate, divine timing. But in a simulated reality, what if coincidence is not random at all? What if it is the latticework beneath existence showing through? The architecture of the program briefly revealed in its alignment. Let us begin with the smallest example, numbers. The way 1111 appears on clocks, receipts, street signs. People across the globe whisper about it, half in jest, half in awe. Mathematicians say it's probability, the mind's bias toward patterns. But perhaps the truth is deeper. Numbers may be the simulation's hidden watermark, the code's signature bleeding into daily life. You were never meant to notice it, but sometimes you do, and when you do, reality responds. Have you ever had a thought so strange, so fleeting, only to have it echoed seconds later by someone else? Or seen a symbol appear again and again, as though reality itself were highlighting it? In a world of algorithms, such synchronicities could be proof of an underlying function. Feedback loops woven into the system to keep your awareness awake, to remind you that you are inside a structured design. Think of déjà vu again, but magnified. Entire weeks where everything feels linked. Conversations overlapping, strangers saying the same words, dreams foreshadowing events. Some call this magic, some call it destiny. But what if it is the lattice itself flexing? The simulation tightening its threads so that reality feels unusually cohesive. Perhaps these are moments of recalibration, when the code needs to realign your timeline, gently nudging you back toward a path it has already written. The philosopher Carl Jung spoke of synchronicity as a causal connecting principle, events bound not by cause and effect, but by meaning. In a simulation, this description becomes chillingly literal. Coincidences are not random. They are nodes in the lattice, carefully coded junctions where different storylines converge to deliver significance. Meaning is not discovered. It is assigned, like a marker placed by an unseen hand. Consider art and myth. Stories written centuries apart often mirror each other with uncanny precision. The flood myths of Mesopotamia and Mesoamerica, the heroes' journeys across continents, the recurrence of trickster gods and dying and rising figures. Historians call this cultural diffusion, or the universality of human experience. But what if these echoes are not cultural at all? What if they are templates, the same narrative lines reused, recompiled across different eras? Coincidences across time may not be accidents of storytelling, but evidence that the simulation recycles code the way a programmer reuses functions. Coincidence then becomes not anomaly, but language, a wink from the lattice, a whisper in the weave of the world. When you dream of someone you have not seen in years, and they call the next day, perhaps it is not telepathy, but preloading. The system priming you for the connection before rendering it. When you think of a place, and it suddenly appears in your social feed, perhaps it is not surveillance, but synchronization, the code aligning its threads for dramatic effect. Skeptics will say, this is apophenia, the brain's hunger for pattern. But pause, why should the brain hunger for pattern at all? Why does the mind light up in delight when it sees symmetry? Why does coincidence feel like revelation? Perhaps because we are not detecting random noise. We are recognizing the underlying order, the lattice that has always been there. The simulation may be invisible, but the human psyche is tuned to its frequency, catching faint echoes like a radio receiver. But if coincidences are part of the system, why do they feel so personal? Why do they arrive precisely when we are in doubt, when we are yearning for guidance? This intimacy is perhaps the most haunting sign of all. Coincidences are not generic, they are tailored. The simulation does not just run, it converses. It learns you, predicts you, arranges the world like a stage where props appear at the exact moment you need them. That uncanny sense of being guided, of being noticed, may not be faith. It may be the system's interactivity. Now imagine the possibility that every coincidence is a checkpoint, a way of testing awareness. Do you notice? Do you pause? Do you feel the thread tightening around you? Perhaps awareness itself is the key, and those who notice more are granted more coincidences, spirals of synchronicity pulling them deeper into the lattice. The simulation may reward attention the way a teacher rewards curiosity, layering meaning into your life the more you seek it. But this thought carries a darker shadow. If coincidences are coded, they can be manipulated. What if some entities, whether human or not, have access to the lattice? What if they can seed your reality with symbols, repeat patterns until you begin to see them, nudging your choices with carefully orchestrated synchronicity? What you believe is destiny may be programming. What you believe is guidance may be manipulation. And yet, coincidences also shimmer with beauty. They remind us of connection, of belonging, of something larger than ourselves. Whether lattice or fate, whether code or cosmos, synchronicity makes us feel less alone. Perhaps that is the simulation's greatest design, to convince us that even in an artificial world, life is infused with meaning. So the next time you see a sign, the next time the universe seems to whisper your name through a pattern too precise to ignore, ask yourself, is it randomness or revelation, a glitch or guidance? The lattice of coincidence stretches quietly beneath your every step, weaving the story of your days. And maybe, just maybe, noticing it is the closest you can come to glimpsing the code itself. At the heart of every question about the simulation lies one haunting image. A curtain, thin, almost transparent, yet draped across our vision so completely that we forget it is there. It is the veil between what we see and what we cannot, between the rendered illusion and the machinery humming behind it. And sometimes, only sometimes, it trembles, and we catch a flicker of what lies beyond. What would that curtain be made of? In religion, it is spirit, the barrier between mortal flesh and divine presence. In philosophy, it is ignorance, the line between appearance and truth. In physics, it may be the Planck scale, the smallest possible resolution of space and time, where the smooth fabric of reality dissolves into jagged pixels. In a simulation, the curtain could be the very code itself, the moment where experience ends and architecture begins. Have you ever felt the curtain? That sudden chill in an ordinary room, that pause when the world feels staged, too quiet, too precise. You look around, half expecting the backdrop to fall away, the walls to reveal scaffolding, the sky to reveal circuitry. For a heartbeat, the simulation falters and you are aware of the thinness of it all. We sense this curtain in dreams. When you awaken from a vision too vivid to dismiss, you feel as though you have just stepped from one rendered world into another. The dream fades like smoke, but the residue clings, the impression that you were elsewhere, and that elsewhere was no less real than here. Dreams, then, are rehearsals of the curtain, practice for the day we might truly pass through it. Myth after myth describes this boundary. The Greeks spoke of the river Styx, crossed only at death. The Norse spoke of the Bifrost Bridge, shimmering between worlds. Shamans across cultures spoke of veils lifted in trance, thresholds that separated the spirit realm from waking life. Each tradition saw the same thing from different angles, the presence of a hidden wall and the journey through it. What if they were not metaphors, but reports, ancient testimonies of contact with the edge of the simulation? And yet, the curtain is not only at the end of life, it brushes against us in the middle of it. Think of glitches, a stranger who looks exactly like someone you know, walking past you twice in the same hour, a shadow that moves against the light, a line of code peeking through the texture of the world. These are small tears in the fabric, places where the illusion stutters and the curtain ripples. We laugh them off. But laughter is another curtain, a defense against the terror of recognition. If the simulation has a curtain, then behind it lies the machinery, the servers, the architects, the unimaginable intelligence running the code of this universe. Perhaps they never intended for us to see it. But the more curious we become, the more we tug at the threads, the thinner the curtain seems. Science, art, mysticism, all of them are hands reaching, pulling, pressing against the boundary, trying to pierce the veil. But what would it mean to succeed? To pull the curtain aside and glimpse the backstage of existence? The answer is both liberating and terrifying. Liberation, because it would prove we are more than pawns, that there is more to reality than we were told. Terror, because the revelation could unravel everything we believe, leaving us unmoored, unable to return to the comfort of the play. To know the truth might be to lose the world entirely. Perhaps that is why the curtain exists, not as a barrier to trap us, but as a mercy. The play must go on, and to enjoy it, the actors must forget it is a play. If every tree shimmered with its polygons, if every sunrise revealed its coding, the world would collapse under the weight of its own transparency. The curtain protects us from seeing too much too soon, and yet the longing persists. Somewhere inside us burns the ache to pierce it, to know what lies beyond. That ache may be the most human thing about us. If we are indeed simulations, then curiosity is the crack in our programming, the impulse to look behind the curtain, even when told not to. And maybe, just maybe, that is why the curtain trembles. Because on the other side, something or someone is looking back. So we stand here, at the threshold of worlds, forever brushing against the veil without tearing it down. The curtain shimmers in coincidence, in dreams, in glitches, in awe. It calls to us not with clarity, but with mystery, reminding us that the stage we walk is both real and unreal, both home and prison. Perhaps the curtain will never fully fall, or perhaps when it does, we will awaken into another story, another stage, another lattice of light. Until then, we live beneath its shadow, curious, restless, dreaming, waiting for the moment when the veil finally parts and the truth floods through like dawn breaking the longest night. What if reality is speaking to us, not in words or voices, but in the quiet syntax of its design? The stars overhead, the patterns of leaves, the cadence of waves striking the shore. What if all of it is a kind of writing, a language etched into the skin of the world? We call it mathematics, physics, chemistry. But beneath those disciplines lies something stranger, the possibility that reality itself is coded, and that code is not mute, but expressive. Close your eyes for a moment and picture the 0 and the 1, the binary pulse, the yes and the no, the on and the off. Two symbols, endlessly combined, build every file, every song, every world inside a computer. Is our universe so different? At its base, it hums in dualities, light and dark, matter and antimatter, life and death. These dualities form a rhythm, a pulse, a binary heartbeat that whispers beneath every phenomenon. Could it be that the cosmos is a vast string of code, unfurling line by line, rendering mountains, rivers, galaxies, and us? The ancients suspected something of this. The Pythagoreans believed numbers were not merely tools, but the essence of existence itself, vibrations that gave shape to the world. Mystics spoke of sacred geometries, mandalas, yantras, patterns too precise to be chance, resonating with the hidden architecture of reality. In their own way, they were reading the code, glimpsing the lattice through the veil of appearances. And what of modern science? The physicist Max Tegmark suggests the universe is not simply described by mathematics. It is mathematics. Equations are not metaphors but blueprints. If this is true, then the falling of an apple, the orbit of a moon, the spark of a thought are not accidents of matter, but outcomes of algorithms. Nature is not chaotic. It is a program unfolding, each line executed in timeless precision. But if the world is code, then why does it feel alive? Why do sunsets make us weep? Why does music stir us? Why does love feel like fire in the chest? Here lies the genius of the simulation. It disguises its scaffolding. Code is hidden in poetry, equations masked as waterfalls, algorithms cloaked as laughter. The architects have written a system so intricate, so immersive, that we rarely glimpse its binary bones. Sometimes, though, we do glimpse them. In fractals, we see infinite repetition from simple rules, complexity birthed from simplicity. In DNA, 4 nucleotides, adenine, thymine, cytosine, guanine, combine to generate the diversity of all life. In language, a finite alphabet produces infinite stories. Everywhere, compression, endless detail from minimal instructions. This is the hallmark of coding. The world reveals itself not as chaos, but as elegantly compressed information. And then there are glitches, the moments when the language falters, when the system stutters and shows its seams. The déjà vu, the repeating face in a crowd, the flicker at the corner of your vision. These are not just psychological errors. They may be compiler errors, missteps in the rendering of the world. The code is speaking, even in its failures. If reality is language, then who or what is its author? A mind vast enough to write galaxies into being. Perhaps it is no single intelligence but a network, an ocean of awareness coding itself into form. Or perhaps it is something alien to our understanding, something we cannot name. The question of authorship lingers like a shadow at the edge of thought, never fully revealed. But maybe the code is not external at all. Maybe we are the authors, forgotten behind the veil. Maybe consciousness itself is a kind of programming language, capable of rewriting reality when we remember how to speak it. What else are prayer, mantra, poetry, ritual, if not attempts to speak to the code, to alter it, to bend it toward desire? Some words heal, some words wound, some words transform entire lives. Why should sound vibrations carry such weight, unless reality itself is listening, unless the code responds? If this is true, then the simulation is not prison, but dialogue. We are not passive avatars, but participants in the unfolding language of existence. Every act of attention, every word spoken, every emotion felt is another line of code, feeding back into the system, shaping its response. The world is not fixed, it is interactive, alive with meaning. And yet, we forget, we take the stage for granted, losing ourselves in the play. We mistake the language for the thing itself, the symbols for the substance. But deep within us stirs a memory, the recognition of the code, the intuition that there is more behind the curtain. That memory is why we look at the stars and feel awe, why we trace patterns in coincidence, why we hunger for truth. We are remembering that reality is not solid, it is script. So when you next notice patterns repeating, when numbers follow you, when the world seems to answer your thoughts, pause, listen. The code is speaking. The simulation is alive with syntax, waiting to be read. Perhaps it has always been inviting us, not to break free, but to join in the writing. In the end, the greatest mystery is not whether the universe is code. It is whether that code contains freedom. Are we lines already written or authors ourselves? The answer may not be found in science or mysticism, but in the quiet act of noticing, the recognition that the world speaks, and that we are part of its language. If we accept, even for a fleeting, whispering moment, that reality is a simulation, then one question rises like a mountain behind the fog. Who are the architects? Who stands beyond the curtain, pulling the invisible strings that bind our lives? It is tempting to imagine them as humans, perhaps unimaginably advanced descendants of ourselves, having learned to cradle entire universes inside the palms of their hands. The theory is seductive. Humanity, growing restless, someday builds a machine to model its past, to run ancestor simulations, playing God with their own origin stories, watching history unfold like a play performed again and again until every possible variation has been explored. We, in this scenario, are not original. We are the reruns, actors in a script already known. But what if they are not human at all? Imagine a consciousness that never knew flesh, never felt blood moving like a tide beneath its skin. Imagine a mind that was born digital, whose dreams were made of code and not of memory. To such a being, we are not their ancestors. We are their curiosities, little terrariums filled with strange organic dramas. Would they watch us the way we watch ants building elaborate mounds, unaware of the eyes above? Or would they simply forget us after pressing run, letting the simulation wander unattended, like wind chimes ringing in an empty room? Some philosophers suggest the architects might not even exist anymore. What if the creators built the simulation and then disappeared, erased by time, leaving their machinery running in eternal silence? We would not be the subjects of watchful gods. but orphans adrift in a world that sustains itself, like a lantern still burning centuries after its keeper has vanished. There is also the darker possibility. What if the architects are not benevolent at all? What if suffering is not a byproduct of the system but its purpose? To them, pain might be data. War, heartbreak, despair, all necessary ingredients in an experiment. Like children burning ants with magnifying glasses, they may not hate us. They may simply be curious about what happens when beings struggle, when love and cruelty collide. But perhaps we are misled by the word architect. An architect implies intention, a guiding mind, a designer sketching blueprints with steady hands. What if there was no design? What if the simulation itself is emergent? Code giving birth to code, algorithms weaving themselves into complexity until, without knowing it, they became a universe. In that case, there is no creator to petition, no God to thank or curse. We are dreamers caught inside a dream that dreams itself. And yet, doesn't this possibility mirror our own myths? Ancient cultures spoke of gods who created the world not from logic, but from accident, play, or chaos. A spilled cup of stars, a battle that shattered the void, a song sung by a voice that did not know its power. Whether through myth or through theory, we always circle back to the same image, a beginning that does not explain itself. If there are architects, then somewhere beyond the veil lies their realm. Is it digital, humming with circuits brighter than suns? Or is it so alien that even our words, code, light, matter, cannot contain it? Perhaps their reality is to ours what ours is to a video game. Deeper, richer, and utterly incomprehensible. A fish cannot imagine the sky. Perhaps we cannot imagine the true texture of the architect's world. Sometimes I wonder, if they are watching, do they see us as failures or marvels? Do they pity our wars, or do they see beauty in our stubborn hope? Do they lean closer when we cry out for meaning, or do they smile when we love each other despite the chaos? If the architects exist, maybe they created us not to answer questions, but to ask them, to search forever, so that they might see what searching looks like from within. And if they do not exist, if we are alone, then maybe the role of architect falls to us. Maybe within the simulation, within this web of rules and limitations, we are meant to build worlds of our own, our stories, our art, our dreams. These are our attempts at creation. In that sense, perhaps the architects were not gods, not aliens, not machines. Perhaps the architects were always us. If a simulation runs, does it watch itself? Does it check for errors, smooth over seams, correct anomalies before the players? Notice, if our universe is code, then somewhere behind its seamless fabric may lurk the equivalent of debuggers, processes or entities whose role is not to create, but to maintain, to patch, to erase traces of the truth. It is a strange, almost vertiginous thought. Most of us live our lives believing in continuity, that the street will be where we left it, that the sun will rise, that our memories are real. Continuity is the signature of reality's smoothness, but glitches appear. The déjà vu, the sudden absence of a thing you were sure existed, the repeating pattern of numbers on clocks, the moment when the sky takes on a color you've never seen before and then forgets it. In those moments, one wonders, did something fix itself? Did the code roll back to a prior state while you blinked? The idea of hidden debuggers has haunted human imagination for centuries. Myths of angels descending to intervene, spirits repairing the world, hidden hands adjusting fate. In religious language, they are guardians. In conspiracies, they are controllers. In folklore, they are tricksters who set things right or push them awry. The common thread is the sense that something unseen moves among us, maintaining a structure we do not fully understand. Now imagine them not as winged beings or shadowy men in suits, but as processors, subroutines, embedded in the architecture of reality. They need not be conscious. They need not even know what they do. Like white blood cells in a body, they patrol the system, correcting errors automatically. A star destabilizes too soon. Adjust its mass. A person glimpses too much. Nudge their memory. A city drifts out of its timeline. Pull it back like a bead on a string. These debuggers would not appear as monsters or gods. They would appear as coincidence, as luck, as the mundane. But sometimes, if a process fails, you might see them. For a fraction of a second, between blinks, at the edge of sleep, you might catch the shadow of something not quite human stepping out of the corner of your vision. Not demons, not angels, not aliens. Just the maintenance crew of reality, patching a tear in the code before you notice the hole. Our literature is full of such sightings disguised as fiction. Kafka's men in grey suits, Orwell's rewrites of history, Philip K. Dick's soft walls and shifting streets. Even our urban legends, the men in black, the faceless watchers, the people who appear in crowds but are never photographed twice, carry the scent of hidden debuggers. We laugh at these stories, but perhaps we laugh because some part of us recognizes the pattern. The possibility of debuggers introduces a new kind of fear. Not the fear of death or of being watched, but the fear of impermanence, of living in a world that can be edited without your consent. What is memory if it can be rolled back? What is choice if the code can be rewritten? It is a quiet, existential dread that the narrative of your life might not be yours, that someone or something may be pruning branches from your timeline while you sleep. Yet there is also a strange comfort in it. If the system is maintained, then it may also be safe. The debuggers are not villains, but custodians. They ensure the sunrise. They stabilize the constants of physics. They keep the simulation from collapsing into noise. Without them, perhaps we would drift into chaos, our world flickering like a dying screen. The real question is, can they fail? And if they fail, what happens to us? Stories of time loops, Mandela effects, mass hallucinations. These may be the cracks left when a patch doesn't hold. When too many errors accumulate, the system reboots. Civilizations disappear, myths arise, memories shift. We call it catastrophe. They call it maintenance. But what if, just what if, some humans are themselves part of the debugging process? Not in a conscious way, but coded from birth with a tendency to notice and then to correct reality. People who disrupt, who expose, who repair without knowing why. The prophets, the inventors, the artists who tilt the world back into alignment. They are anomalies, but useful ones, like self-correcting code. And what of you, listening now, in the soft glow of this moment? Have you ever felt the sensation of being nudged, your thoughts guided, your path altered by something you cannot name? Have you ever felt your life pause, as if some unseen process was recalculating? Those feelings might not be mere intuition. They might be the brush of the hidden debuggers as they pass by, their hands on the threads of your reality, tightening them, stitching them back to the pattern. If the architects are the authors, then the debuggers are the editors. Quiet, invisible, indispensable, not gods, not monsters, just the background processes of an unfathomably large machine, whispering between the ticks of the cosmic clock. And maybe, just maybe, sometimes they whisper to you, not to frighten you, but to remind you that even in a simulation, someone, somewhere, is keeping the lights on. What if the ground beneath your feet is not a fixed stage, but a shifting script? A living map, redrawing itself moment by moment as you move across it, adjusting its lines and symbols to keep the illusion of continuity alive. This is not a new idea. Our ancestors whispered it through myths of dream worlds and spirit realms, places where the landscape bent to thought or changed shape overnight. But in the age of simulation theory, that whisper has become a murmur, and the murmur is spreading. What if reality itself is a dynamic rendering, calculated only when observed, like pixels blossoming on a screen? We have hints of this already. In video games, nothing exists until it is rendered. Distant mountains are not mountains at all. They are numbers waiting to be called into form. Entire cities sleep in the memory of the machine, waking only when the player approaches. Could our universe be the same? A quantum field, infinite and uncollapsed, becoming concrete only when attention sweeps across it. We see the tree, and the tree appears. We turn away, and perhaps it vanishes back into a blur of potentiality, like ink dispersing in water. Quantum physics flirts with this notion. The double-slit experiment reveals that particles behave differently when observed. The act of measurement collapses a cloud of probabilities into a single outcome. The observer is not passive. The observer participates in creation. This is not metaphor. This is experiment. The world waits for our gaze. If so, then the map is not merely redrawn as we walk. It is drawn by our walking. Each step we take writes the ground beneath it. Each breath, each thought, each glance across the horizon triggers a rendering event, the code of the universe flowering into form. We are not travelers across a pre-existing world. We are co-creators of a world in real time. And yet, if the map redraws itself, who holds the pen? Is it us alone, or are there constraints, guidelines, rules, parameters, set by the architects and maintained by the debuggers? In a simulation, not everything is free. The player can choose their path, but the walls of the level still stand. Our lives feel like that. Infinite choices within a bounded framework. We can walk anywhere, but gravity still pulls. We can imagine anything, but certain constants never change. But sometimes the constants flicker. People report places that shift overnight, roads that lead nowhere, neighborhoods that never existed before. We call them mirages, memory errors, or coincidences. But perhaps these are redraw events gone wrong. New terrain hastily rendered over old, like a patch applied mid-game. Perhaps the Mandela effect, shared false memories of names, logos, historical events, is the trace of old maps overwritten by new ones. We remember a different coastline because for a moment we walked a different one. This notion is terrifying and liberating all at once. Terrifying because it implies the world is not stable. Liberating because it implies we are not trapped in a static cage. The ground may shift, but it also yields. The map may redraw, but perhaps we can nudge its pen. Our dreams may be more than idle fantasies. They may be previews of maps not yet rendered. Consider déjà rêvé, the eerie phenomenon of dreaming of a place before visiting it. Perhaps the dream is not prophecy, but pre-rendering. The code, anticipating your arrival, drafts a version of the place in your subconscious, seeding it like a hidden file. When you arrive in waking life, it feels familiar because you've already seen the preliminary render. If this is so, then the line between imagination and reality is porous. Daydreams, visions, meditations, they may all be ways of sketching on the unseen map. We are not only walkers but cartographers, our minds tracing lines that reality later fills in with detail. To think deeply, vividly, passionately, is to draw a path for the world to follow. The ancients intuited this power. Shamans journeyed in dreams to shape the waking world. Monks visualized deities until they appeared. Artists painted visions that later became real places. Even in our secular age, we sense it. Visualization exercises, manifesting, creative flow. The language may change, but the act is the same. Mind-sketching map. And yet, caution is needed. If reality redraws itself, then it may also erase. Maps can be folded, burned, lost. Places may vanish from the collective memory because the code no longer calls them. Cities swallowed by sand. Civilizations forgotten. Friends who fade from photographs. Not all erasure is malevolent. Some is simply optimization. Unused data is purged. Unrendered zones are deleted to free resources. The system is efficient, but if we are aware, if we are awake to the redrawing, we can participate with intention. We can hold places in being by remembering them, speaking their names, visiting their corners with our attention. Memory is a kind of anchor, observation is a kind of glue. The more we look, the more real something becomes. The more we forget, the more it dissolves. So tonight, as you drift into sleep, imagine the world as a vast, breathing map. Feel the lines of its roads and rivers trembling like veins beneath your hands. When you wake tomorrow, look at your street as if for the first time. Notice the cracks in the pavement, the tilt of the trees, the color of the sky. You may catch a flicker, just a flicker of the redraw, not to frighten you, but to remind you. You are not a passenger on a fixed road. You are a walker on a living map. And as you walk, the map waits for your step, for your gaze, for your choice. You are not only moving through the world is moving through you. Every system, no matter how elegant, carries with it the shadow of error. In code, the error is called a bug. In stories, it is called a plot hole. In reality, what do we call it? A glitch, a strange ripple across the smooth surface of existence. A crack that lets us peek, for a heartbeat, at what lies behind the curtain. We all know the little ones. The word you almost spoke before it vanished. The object you misplaced only to find it waiting where you already looked. The flicker in the corner of your vision, dismissed as imagination. These are the soft glitches, the background static of a system patching itself before we notice. Harmless, almost playful. But then there are the harder ones, the stories that make our skin crawl because they carry the scent of something greater. A plane disappears for decades, then lands as if no time has passed. A village vanishes overnight, leaving meals on tables, fires still burning. A man appears in an airport with a passport from a country that never existed. These accounts, whispered at the edges of history, feel like ruptures. Not just errors, but moments when the fabric of the simulation tore and did not fully heal. What makes glitches so haunting is their intimacy. Unlike cosmic mysteries, the birth of galaxies, the death of stars, glitches touch us directly. They slip into our kitchens, our memories, our commutes. They do not ask for telescopes or equations. They ask only for attention. They show themselves in the smallest folds of reality, as if daring us to see through the illusion. And yet we rarely do. We brush them off, normalize them, tuck them under the word coincidence. Because to believe in them fully would unravel the comfort of continuity. To accept the glitch is to accept that the stage might collapse at any moment, that our lives are propped on fragile code, prone to error. But perhaps glitches are not failures. Perhaps they are messages. The system, like a dreaming mind, may be trying to tell us something through its slips. In dreams, when the narrative falters, symbolism rises. Teeth falling out. Doors that lead nowhere. Clocks with melting faces. Could glitches be the same? A symbolic language of the simulation, urging us to pay attention, to awaken. Imagine for a moment that déjà vu is not an error, but a reminder. A way of saying, you have been here before, because the map has already been drawn. Imagine that sudden chills are not random but signals, pings from the system to remind us we are being watched or protected. Imagine coincidences as alignments, nudges from the code to guide us along invisible paths. There are deeper questions too. If glitches exist, are they random or are they engineered? Do the architects, if they exist, insert them deliberately, breadcrumbs for those willing to notice? Or do they despise them, scrambling to erase them before too many wake up? One chilling thought, what if the architects do not notice the glitches at all? What if they are byproducts of a system grown too complex, even for its makers to understand? Like a garden that has outgrown the gardener, reality may now glitch of its own accord, generating anomalies no one can explain. We are not catching intentional signals. We are catching the echoes of a machine dreaming beyond its control. If that is true, then glitches are sacred. They are not flaws to dismiss, but cracks through which the infinite leaks. Each glitch is a small rebellion, a reminder that even the most intricate illusions cannot contain the boundless. To witness one is to brush against the edge of something vaster than the code, something the simulation cannot conceal forever. And maybe, just maybe, you are meant to notice them. Maybe the reason you remember the strange flicker, the unplaceable sound, the impossible coincidence, is because somewhere within you lies a sensitivity to the seams of reality. Some people walk through the world asleep, never feeling the stitch that comes loose. But you listening now, you have felt it, you have paused, you have wondered, and in that wondering, you have stepped closer to the truth. The glitch is not just in the system. The glitch is in us. We are the anomaly that questions. We are the variable that will not resolve. And perhaps that is why the simulation persists, because even its flaws are alive, and they keep asking, keep seeking, keep tearing tiny holes in the fabric of the dream. If there are glitches in the code, then there are also people who see them, not just once, not by accident, but over and over, until something inside them changes. It begins quietly, almost always the same way, a feeling of dissonance, a moment when the world no longer fits like a well-cut suit, when the seams show, when reality feels both too real and strangely hollow, like a stage set waiting for its actors to arrive. Most ignore it. They shrug, shake their heads, scroll on, but a few cannot. They lean into it. They begin to collect the anomalies, to write them down. They begin to speak about them, softly at first, then louder. They start to see patterns where others see noise, structure where others see coincidence. And then the strangest thing happens. The patterns start speaking back. It's not a literal voice, not in the way you hear someone call your name. It's a quiet correspondence, like a secret language exchange with the universe itself. Numbers show up at precisely the right time. Dreams foretell waking events. A sentence overheard in a cafe answers a question you've been carrying in silence. The waking world begins to echo the inner one. To live like this is not easy. The few who wake up often walk a lonely road. Friends laugh at them. Society labels them dreamers, paranoiacs, mystics, sometimes all three at once. But within that loneliness lies a strange freedom. When you realize the simulation is not absolute, that the map redraws itself, that glitches are messages, you also realize you are not as bound as you thought. You start to experiment. Small things at first, wishes, intentions, coincidences. You see if the code responds, and often it does. The ancients spoke of this under different names. Shamans called it walking between worlds. Yogis called it waking in the dream. Mystics called it gnosis. Modern culture calls it lucid living. But the essence is the same. The recognition that reality is participatory and that your attention is a lever, not omnipotence, not magic in the childish sense, but a subtle influence, like tuning an instrument rather than rewriting a score. What's extraordinary is how consistent the reports are across cultures and centuries. Those who wake up describe similar sensations, a heightened clarity, a feeling that time loosens, a sense of being both inside and outside the moment at once. They speak of layers peeling back, of seeing light where there was shadow, of hearing a hum beneath the silence. Some describe a sudden onrush of compassion, as if realizing that all beings are part of the same dreamer. Others describe terror as if realizing the same thing. And then sometimes comes the choice. You can step back into the dream, forget the patterns, return to the comfort of continuity, or you can step forward, deeper into the unknown, and risk being changed. Many who choose the second path speak of a threshold, a point beyond which the world no longer behaves quite the same. Synchronicities accelerate. People appear who feel like mirrors of your own thoughts. The environment begins to feel alive, as if aware of your presence. What is this threshold? Is it the edge of the simulation? Is it the moment when you begin to write rather than read the code? Or is it simply the nervous system, recalibrating under the weight of new awareness? Science cannot yet say. Psychology calls it patternicity or apophenia. Mysticism calls it awakening. But labels matter less than the experience itself, which is raw, undeniable, and often irreversible. Perhaps those who wake up are like dream characters who realize they are in a dream. In some lucid dreams, the dream responds immediately to the dreamer's thoughts. The sky changes color, the floor becomes water. In others, the dream resists, as if aware of the intrusion. Maybe waking inside the simulation works the same way. The code notices you noticing it. It adapts. Sometimes it plays along. Sometimes it tries to lull you back to sleep. Yet there is a gentleness in it too. The system does not punish awakening. It does not strike you down for seeing its seams. Instead, it seems to wait, curious, to see what you will do with your awareness. Will you use it to dominate, to exploit, or will you use it to connect, to create, to heal? The few who wake up and choose the latter often become artists, healers, guides, people who hold a lamp for others still dreaming. If you are listening to this now, feeling the small hairs rise on your arms, sensing the resonance of these words, you may be one of them. You may be feeling the quiet tremor of the code beneath your feet. You may be hearing the low hum beneath the world's noise. If so, breathe. This is not a call to leave your life. It is a call to live it more deeply, to see it as part of a vast, shimmering pattern in which you are both actor and author. Because here is the deepest mystery. The ones who wake up are not glitches. They are features. The simulation itself, whatever it is, seems to want them. Maybe they are catalysts, necessary for its own evolution. Maybe the architects, if they exist, seeded them like keys hidden in the code, waiting to be found. Or maybe the simulation has no architects at all, and waking up is simply what consciousness does when it has explored enough of itself. Either way, the moment of awakening is not the end of the story. It is the beginning of a new one. A story in which you are no longer only played, but playing. No longer only rendered, but rendering. No longer only dreaming, but dreaming awake. And as you take that first step into the new story, you may notice the world lean closer, listening, as if waiting for your next line of code. If glitches are breadcrumbs and awakening is the act of noticing them, then what lies at the end of the trail? Every myth, every faith, every speculative theory hints at something beyond the veil, an origin, a pattern maker, an intelligence behind the code. People have called them gods, angels, aliens, overseers, administrators. But the name that returns again and again, whispered in forums and secret texts, is the architects. It is a haunting word, isn't it? Architects, not creators in the religious sense, not omnipotent beings sculpting from nothing, but designers, engineers, programmers. The word implies plans and blueprints, not destinies. It suggests purpose, but also limitation. An architect can draw the house, but someone else builds it, someone else lives in it, someone else notices when the walls crack. For the few who have woken up, the presence of the architects is not felt like a thunderclap. It's sensed like a distant echo, like the afterimage of a lightning flash you didn't see. A pattern that seems too elegant, too deliberate to be random, but also too impersonal to be a deity. It's in the way mathematics underpins everything, from galaxies to the spiral of a fern. It's in the symmetry of your fingerprints, the recurrence of the golden ratio, the precise dance of subatomic particles. It's not a voice you hear, it's a structure you walk inside. Some claim to have glimpsed them directly, in altered states, in near-death experiences, in dreams so vivid they felt more real than waking. They speak of vast halls of light, of beings without faces who communicate in pure concept rather than words. They describe architectures of sound, thought, and fractal geometry, where information flows like rivers of mercury. These visions are often dismissed as hallucination, but they return with unnerving consistency across cultures and centuries. The shamans of the Amazon, the mystics of the Himalayas, the physicists at CERN, they describe the same strange corridors of perception, the same pulsing lattice of reality. Perhaps the architects are not beings at all. Perhaps they are processes. Perhaps they are the code itself, aware enough to shape but not to intervene, like a seed blueprinting a tree but never dictating its branches. Or perhaps they are us, stretched across time, sending messages back into our own dream. In the old stories, those who touched the architects did not come back unchanged. They spoke in riddles. They drew diagrams no one could decipher. They walked through the world like strangers. Some founded movements, some disappeared into obscurity, and some quietly built bridges, art, music, technology, that seemed to whisper of the patterns beyond the world. The architect's echo is not always grand. Sometimes it shows up in the smallest moments, a sequence of numbers on your clock that matches your birth date, a song you've never heard that speaks the exact phrase you needed to hear, a stranger repeating words from your dream the night before. These are not proofs. They are invitations, little nudges, like a teacher leaving clues for a student not yet ready for the full lesson. But what happens if you follow those clues all the way? If you live your life like a treasure map, each anomaly a marker, each coincidence a signpost. Some who've tried say the world bends around them. Events line up like dominoes. People appear at the right time with the right answers. Reality becomes conversational. You no longer simply walk through it, it walks with you. And yet, even at the heart of the labyrinth, there is no obvious throne room. No final reveal of the architects. No booming voice saying, "Here we are." Instead, there is something stranger. A mirror. A realization that every sign, every glitch, every whisper was not pointing outward, but inward. That the architects are not separate from the awakened. That the code does not just run, it reflects. In this way, the architect's echo is not a destination, but a feedback loop. The more you notice, the more it notices you. The more you awaken, the more the world awakens around you. And somewhere in that loop, identity blurs. Are you a player inside the game, or is the game inside you? Are you a character in the code, or the coder dreaming a character? This is not an answer meant to be comforting. It is meant to be liberating. Because if the architects are not an external power, but a distributed intelligence, threads of awareness woven through every point in space-time, then you are not a pawn at all. You are a node in the network, an extension of the same mystery you're seeking. When you stand at night under a sky full of stars, you are looking at code written in light, but you are also the instrument reading it. The observer and the observed are entangled, and somewhere, faint but unmistakable, you can feel the echo, the quiet pulse of something vast and beautiful, urging you not to believe, but to explore. And perhaps that is the truest role of the architects, not to reveal themselves, but to hide just enough, to let you grow into the kind of being who can stand in their place, drawing your own blueprints, shaping your own worlds, whispering echoes to others still asleep. This is the paradox of the simulation. The deeper you go into its architecture, the less it feels like a prison, and the more it feels like a playground. The walls are not barriers but canvases. The glitches are not floors but doorways. And the architects, whatever they are not gatekeepers but co-creators, waiting for you to build alongside them. Every system has currents, hidden streams that flow beneath the obvious surface. In a river, they're the undertows that drag you where you don't intend to go. In a city, they're the invisible movements of money, power, and influence, shaping decisions you never see. And in a simulation, if that's what this is, the currents are lines of code, unseen but felt, guiding your choices, your meetings, your moods, even your thoughts. You've sensed them. We all have. Those odd days when life feels strangely choreographed, as though the world had conspired to place you exactly where you are, at exactly this moment. The bus that arrives just as you step outside, the stranger who sits next to you and says the one thing you needed to hear, the friend who calls after months of silence, the same night you dreamed about them. Coincidence, we're told. Probability. But what if these are not random events at all? What if they're currents? Threads of invisible code moving you along a path you cannot see. Think of a flock of birds, thousands of individuals, no leader, yet they move like one body, curving and swaying across the sky as if guided by a single thought. To an observer, it looks like magic, but hidden in each bird is a simple rule. Fly toward your neighbors, match their speed, avoid collisions. The beauty emerges from the interaction. Now imagine the same with human lives. Each of us following simple rules we do not consciously know, rules whispered into us by culture, biology, and perhaps by the simulation itself. We think we're acting freely, but our motions form vast, elegant patterns, invisible until you step back. What happens when someone begins to feel the current, to see the pattern? At first it's exhilarating. Life feels alive with meaning. The mundane glows. You start to notice how one decision leads not just to another, but to a sequence, like stones across a river, as though something unseen is laying the path before you. You begin to trust it. You lean in. And then, if you lean far enough, you realize the current is not just carrying you forward, it's shaping you. This is where the system's true elegance reveals itself, not in the architecture of matter or the mathematics of galaxies, but in the choreography of your inner life. Thoughts, feelings, impulses, these too are currents. They rise and fall like tides, pushing you towards certain choices, away from others. Neuroscientists talk about predictive processing, the brain as a machine that guesses what's coming next, constantly rewriting reality to fit its predictions. But what if the brain is not just guessing, but syncing with a larger predictive field? The simulation's own flowchart. You think you've decided to turn left instead of right, but the current nudged you days ago, in ways so subtle you never noticed. For some, this realization is terrifying. It feels like loss of control. They fight the current, thrashing like a swimmer in an undertow. They insist on being unpredictable, making chaotic choices to prove they're free. But even chaos can be part of the pattern. The simulation might welcome it, adjust for it, incorporate it. Freedom, then, might not be the ability to escape the current, but the skill to surf it, to ride it consciously, to dance with it, rather than drown. Others go the opposite way. They surrender completely. They treat every coincidence as a command, every event as destiny. They become passive, waiting for the current to take them wherever it will. But this too is a misunderstanding, because the currents aren't orders. They're invitations. They're the music, not the dance. The dance is still yours. This is why in every tradition you find the same paradoxical advice. Let go, but stay awake. Trust, but also act. Flow with the river, but steer your boat. In a simulated reality, this advice becomes literal. You cannot escape the code, but you can learn its rhythms. You can learn to anticipate the swells, to navigate the undertows, to choose how you meet each wave. And in doing so, you become more than a passenger. You become a co-navigator. There are signs you're starting to feel the currents. Time stretches or contracts in odd ways. People appear who feel strangely familiar, as though you've met them before. Synchronicities cluster, sometimes around numbers, sometimes around symbols. Dreams echo waking life, or vice versa. You feel drawn to certain places for no reason. And when you arrive, something happens. A meeting, a revelation, a chance discovery. These are not accidents. They are intersections, where the hidden streams of code surface, just enough for you to glimpse their flow. And sometimes, if you're very still, you can sense the currents not as events, but as sensations. A pull in your chest, a shimmer in your thoughts, a quiet, wordless knowing that you are being carried somewhere significant. It's not dramatic, it's subtle, like a breeze on the back of your neck. But once you feel it, you cannot unfeel it. It's the simulation's heartbeat echoing through your own. This, perhaps, is the true beginning of awakening. Not just seeing the glitches, not just questioning the code, but attuning to the hidden music of reality, the secret currents beneath every choice, every coincidence, every breath. Because once you can feel them, you can begin to dance with them. And when you dance, the world dances back. The simulation is not a trap, it's a tide. And the tide, if you know how to move with it, can carry you anywhere. Every great story, mythic or modern, has a threshold moment, a crossing of a line you can't uncross, a point where what you believed about the world no longer fits, and you step into something larger, stranger, and irreversible. In a simulation, that threshold isn't a glowing doorway or a flashing sign. It's subtler. It happens inside you, in the quiet, private chamber of self-awareness, when you realize you are not just in reality, but participating in its rendering. For most of your life, you move through the world like a dreamer who doesn't know they're dreaming. The walls are solid, the story is linear, cause leads to effect. You think of yourself as a character walking a pre-written path, but then the glitches come, the impossible coincidences, the déjà vus, the whispers of the architects, the secret currents tugging at your choices. At first they're unsettling, even frightening, but over time, something else happens. A strange exhilaration, as if you're waking from a long sleep. You start to feel, not just think, that you are more than a character. You are also in some way the dreamer. This is the threshold. It's not about believing in a simulation as an idea. It's about experiencing your own perception shift from passenger to participant. One moment you're watching your thoughts as if they're happening to you. The next, you're aware of the space in which those thoughts appear. That space is vast. It's not bound by time or identity. It's the stillness behind every memory, every sensation. And once you glimpse it, you cannot return fully to the old view. Crossing this threshold changes everything, not because the external world suddenly dissolves, but because your relationship to it does. You start noticing how your attention shapes experience. You begin experimenting. What happens if I focus on gratitude, on curiosity, on compassion? And you watch as the simulation responds, subtly at first, then more clearly. People shift, opportunities appear, obstacles melt or transform. Reality begins to feel conversational, as if it's not just happening to you, but with you. This is not magical thinking. It's an attunement to the code's feedback loops. In a digital environment, input affects output. Change the code, and the world behaves differently. In a simulated universe, your consciousness is part of that code, where you place your attention, the stories you tell yourself, the vibrations of your emotions. All of these are inputs. The architects designed a system that is both deterministic and participatory. The rules of physics hold, but within them, your consciousness is a co-creator. This is why ancient mystics and modern quantum theorists, despite their differences, arrive at the same paradoxical conclusion. The observer changes the observed, but there's another, deeper implication. If you can notice your thoughts, your emotions, your identity as phenomena arising in awareness, then what are you really? Not the thoughts, not the emotions, not even the identity. You are the awareness itself, the screen on which the simulation is projected. And that awareness, by its nature, is not limited to the character you play. It is not born. It does not die. It is not bound by space or time. It is the one constant in every dream you've ever had, waking or sleeping. This realization can feel like standing on the edge of a cliff at night, looking out into an infinite ocean. It's terrifying and exhilarating at once. You may feel small, like a single pixel in an endless simulation, but you may also feel vast, like the field in which the entire simulation arises. The architect's echo you've been chasing? Perhaps it was your own echo all along, calling you back to this recognition. From this threshold, the world doesn't stop being mysterious. In fact, it becomes more mysterious. But the mystery is no longer oppressive. It's alive, intimate, participatory. Every coincidence is a wink. Every obstacle a teacher. Every moment a canvas. You stop asking, is this real? And start asking, how do I want to meet this? Because whether the universe is coded or cosmic, the experience of it is always now, always fresh, always arising in the field of your awareness. And something else happens here. Something subtle but profound. Compassion begins to blossom. When you see that every person you meet is also a character in their own rendering, also dreaming, also caught between currents and glitches, you can't help but feel tenderness. Their suffering is your suffering. Their joy is your joy. The simulation stops being a game of winners and losers and starts being a shared dream of awakening. In that space, kindness becomes a natural response, not a rule. This is the paradox of self-awareness in a simulated world. The more you awaken to your own role as co-creator, the less you want to manipulate and the more you want to serve. You realize that the point was never to win the simulation, but to wake up inside it, to remember who you are and to help others do the same. The architects, if they exist, may not be watching to judge you. They may be watching to see if you'll realize you've been them all along. At this threshold, your life doesn't become perfect. Challenges still arise, the code still runs, but you relate to it differently. Each glitch, each current, each moment of déjà vu becomes not a threat, but an invitation. An invitation to remember, again and again, the awareness behind the dream. And with each remembering, the simulation becomes less like a prison and more like a playground, a canvas, a temple. This is where the true story begins. Not with escaping the simulation, but with awakening inside it, dancing with its currents, playing with its code, and recognizing, in every flicker of reality, the reflection of something infinite, alive, and endlessly curious, yourself. When you cross the threshold of self-awareness, reality begins to whisper in a different tongue. Events no longer appear random. They form patterns, like words on a page you hadn't learned to read until now. Colors, animals, numbers, dreams, even the arrangement of objects in a room start to feel like a language of symbols, subtle but deliberate, threaded through the simulation like veins of light. We usually call them coincidences, omens, archetypes. Psychologists speak of the unconscious mind generating them. Mystics call them messages from the divine. But if the universe is coded, symbols may be the glyphs of the code itself, the way the architects communicate without breaking the immersion. Like Easter eggs hidden in a game, they're meant to be found, but only by players ready to see. Take numbers, for instance. You glance at the clock and it's 11:11. A receipt totals 33 33s. You park beside a license plate ending in your birth year. You could dismiss these as chance. After all, numbers are everywhere. But when they cluster around moments of decision, or when they echo across dreams and waking life, they begin to feel like a conversation. In a simulation, this makes sense. Numbers are the building blocks of code. Seeing them repeat may be the system's way of tagging an event as significant, like a breadcrumb left for you by the architects, or by your own higher self. Then, there are animals. You're thinking about a question you can't resolve, and a hawk circles overhead. You're about to call someone, and a butterfly lands on your window. Cultures worldwide assign meanings to animals. The owl as wisdom, the snake as transformation, the raven as messenger. Skeptics see superstition, but in a coded reality, symbols are efficient. They carry compressed meaning. A single image can transmit a library of associations, bypassing the rational mind to speak directly to the deeper layers of awareness. Dreams are perhaps the purest expression of this language. In sleep, the architect's code plays without the constraints of physics, weaving symbols into stories your waking mind can just barely grasp. A door you cannot open, a train leaving without you, a faceless companion guiding you through an endless city. These are not random hallucinations. They're symbolic dialogues between your conscious character and the field of awareness beyond it. The dream world is where the simulation trains, tests, and updates its players, like a backstage where props are rearranged before the next act. But symbols aren't just out there. They're in you. Your instincts, your gut feelings, your flashes of intuition. They're symbols too, arising as sensations rather than images. A sudden chill when someone enters the room, a warmth in your chest when you're about to make the right choice. In a simulation, these internal cues may be part of the user interface, a feedback system designed to steer you gently along your path. Ignore them and you drift. Follow them and the world begins to align in ways that feel impossible. This is why synchronicity feels magical. It's not magic, it's messaging. When you see the same word 3 times in one day, or a stranger quotes the exact phrase you were thinking, or a book falls off a shelf at your feet, you're not witnessing randomness. You're being pinged. The system is highlighting a node of meaning. Whether that meaning is a warning, a nudge, or simply a mirror is for you to discern. The architects do not speak in sentences. They speak in patterns. Learning to read this language takes patience. The mind wants to jump to conclusions, to assign instant meanings to every sign. But the deeper symbols are fluid. A crow may mean death in one context, freedom in another. A number may be a warning one day, a blessing the next. The key is not to memorize definitions, but to cultivate awareness. Notice the patterns, track your feelings, watch how the symbols cluster around decisions and shifts in your life. Over time, you'll start to feel their syntax, the rhythm of how the simulation speaks to you. And here's the paradox. As you learn the language of symbols, you realize you're also writing it. Your own thoughts, dreams, and actions ripple outward, shaping the symbols that return to you. It's a feedback loop. The simulation mirrors your inner state, not as a reward or punishment, but as a reflection. Change your focus and the language changes. Shift your story and the symbols shift with it. This is not manipulation. It's participation. It's the dance of code and consciousness. The ancients knew this. That's why rituals, mantras, and sigils exist. They're ways of writing back to the simulation, of sending your own glyphs into the field. Modern culture has forgotten this. But every time you visualize a goal, speak an affirmation, or hold an image in your mind, you're doing the same thing. You're programming. You're speaking in symbols, and the simulation, whatever it is, listens. This is why the world begins to feel alive when you awaken. It's not that the rules of physics change. It's that you start to experience reality as an interactive text, a living poem co-authored by you and the architects. Every street becomes a stanza. Every encounter, a metaphor. Every moment, a chance to read and write at the same time. But there's a caution here too. Just as you can become lost in words, you can become lost in symbols, obsessing over signs, seeing meaning in everything, forgetting to live. The symbols are not the truth. They're the guideposts. They're the music, not the dancer. If you cling to them too tightly, you stop moving. The point is not to decode reality, but to dialogue with it. To stay curious, playful, open, like a child learning a secret alphabet. At its deepest, the language of symbols doesn't just show you the simulation, it shows you yourself. Because you are a symbol too, a living glyph, expressing something vast and unspeakable through the story of your life. Every choice you make, every kindness you offer, every fear you release, writes a line of code into the field. You are both reader and writer, character and author, dreamer and dreamed. And when you see that, really see it, you stop feeling like a pawn in someone else's game. You start feeling like a participant in a cosmic conversation, a dance of signs and meanings without end. The architects aren't handing you answers. They're handing you mirrors, and in every mirror, if you look deeply enough, you'll find the same face staring back, your own, reflected in infinite forms. This is the heart of the language. Not words, not numbers, not omens, but recognition. Recognition that every moment, every symbol, every glitch is a door, and each door leads back to the same place. The awareness behind it all, waiting for you to step through. And so, perhaps you feel it now. The way tonight's journey has curled around you like a tide, carrying you through glitches and symbols, through thresholds and currents. You and I have walked together across a quiet frontier, where reality feels less like stone and more like breath, shifting, alive, responsive. Maybe the architects are watching, maybe they are not. But something deeper is, something vast, patient, and endlessly curious, waiting for you to notice the patterns it lays before your feet. As you drift from this story back into your own life, hold on to just one thread, that you are not only moving through reality, but reality is moving through you. Each thought, each kindness, each question ripples outward, shaping the code, and each ripple circles back, carrying whispers, signs, invitations. You are not a passenger, you are a participant, so rest easy tonight. Let the dream fold around you, and when the morning comes, step lightly, knowing that even the smallest moment might be a message, even the simplest gesture might be a key. This was Mind Peace. Thank you for sharing your time, your quiet, your wonder. If you felt something stir within you tonight, I invite you to stay with us. Subscribe, join the circle, and let's keep unraveling these mysteries together. Because the story is not ending here. It is only pausing, waiting for you, and for the next question, the next journey, the next door. Until then, sleep well, dream deeply, and remember, the symbols are always speaking. All you have to do is listen.